want to talk about the topic of church. It's a big subject, so I think I'm going to make this a multi-part series. This is not going to be a comprehensive class about the doctrine of the church. Rather, I want to offer some bite-sized ideas that I hope will be helpful. We have not been able to physically gather at the church for the past 3.5 months, and soon the physical church is about to reopen partially. So I want to think about the question, what is church? Now, the pastoral staff has worked really hard over the past several weeks. Our efforts at online have sometimes been frustrated by technological glitches, interrupted streaming, sometimes you can't log on, or technology, though remarkable, isn't always adequate. After a particularly frustrating Zoom session a few weeks ago, I joked with some staff that it's good that our technology isn't always that fantastic. If it was, online church might feel better than meeting in person. And if that becomes a case, then and when we're finally over the COVID thing, I'm afraid that no one will ever want to come back. However, that little joke does bring up a little fear I have. A little part of me is worried that as church reopens, some of us might have become so accustomed to some of the benefits of online church that we will be reluctant to attend in-person church. We've gotten so used to this situation. You get to sleep in a little later on Sundays. If you have a family, you don't have to go through the Sunday drama of corralling the kids and getting them dressed and in the car, getting yourself dressed in the long drive to church. I have to admit, wearing sweatpants all day feels kind of nice. Over the course of the past several months, you may have discovered that YouTube church is easier in some ways than the more conventional traditional in-person church we have been doing for years. And if we were to choose between the options of in-person church versus online church, if we were to make our decision on a cost-benefit analysis, it might make more logical sense to keep watching church over YouTube from home. You might find yourself waking up on Sunday morning thinking, well, I could physically go to church, or I could just get on the computer. It's a tempting option, and I gotta be honest, it does seem kind of nice in some ways. I want to take a pause here. I don't think I need to say this, but just in case, I want to be absolutely clear. I am not trying to guilt anyone into coming to church if you are trying to be prudent during the season of COVID-19. If you're going to stay at home on Sundays for a longer period of time because you're concerned about getting ill yourself, or you don't want to get others ill because of you, or you are in regular contact with an older person who might get ill and you want to protect them or something like that, then we get it, right? There are a lot of things to think about. I get it. We get it. No judgment. Okay? We all have different variables to balance. You need to protect yourself and the people around you. But back to the subject of this series, here are some questions I want to think about over the next few videos. What is church? Why do we go? And why exactly are we doing, what exactly are we doing while we're there? And in the process of thinking about these questions, I want to push forward an argument. This online form of church that we've been doing, it is a necessary precaution. And gathering together physically, as we have done in the past, would have been a very bad idea. It would have been reckless and dangerous if we changed nothing. But when it becomes safe to do so, we ought to gather together physically. It is the better option. And to make that point, I want to think about the nature of the church and what it is. I don't think we tend to think didactically about the definition of church. That is, we don't learn about church the same way we learn algebra in school. It's not laid out as a series of propositions and facts. And I think that's actually generally a good thing. Theology in general, and knowledge of church in particular, is shaped by community and practice, not by lecture or what I'm doing here. You learn about the meaning of church, its nature, its purpose, by being part of the church. You learn about the church the same way you learn about being part of a family. Let me give you an example from my own life. My daughters are 11 and 13 now, and they've been learning to be daughters their entire lives. And they are learning to be members of a family or members of a mini community. Meaning, specifically, they are learning to, among other things, obey, submit, love, sacrifice, share, encourage, support, and find joy in one another. They are learning to sacrifice their own individual self-interest for the greater good. To be clear, my kids are a work in progress. My entire family, we are a work in progress. What I've just listed, these are aspirations, not achievements. But, we are learning. I'm learning. Well, how's that happening? Well, I don't actually stand behind a lectern and give really, really long didactic lectures and force them to take notes and then give them exams. That would be kind of fun, but I don't do that. They are shaped and formed gradually and imperceptibly by practice and habit. Now, my wife and I try to be intentional and deliberate. We do things to shape and mold them in a particular direction. But a lot of it is what you just might call modeling Christian virtue, or just living together, day after day after day. I think shaping character is like learning to master an instrument. You can't just read music theory books, regardless of how careful you study music theory. It in itself is inadequate. You need to sit down and eventually just put your hands on a piano and just practice a lot, over and over and over again, the same scales over and over and over again, the same piece again and again and again. You need good instruction, of course. You need good fundamental technique. You need to know how to read notes properly. But a lot of competency and mastery is achieved through practice and repetition. And eventually, you will get better. There is no instantaneous eureka moment. It's similar to the acquisition of language. How do you learn a new language? Reading a textbook and memorizing conjugation charts? Though good and necessary, is in itself insufficient. The best way to learn a new language is the way anyone learns any language. It's rather organic. You plop yourself in a community of people who speak a foreign language. And then you just listen, and then eventually you just try to start talking and interact with them. And you will speak badly at first. And you will keep trying and engaging. It requires deep immersion, deep saturation in a community, of interacting with them organically, spontaneously, in a very real way. And eventually, given enough time, years and years perhaps, you will be fluent. So why go to physical church? Can't I just watch YouTube videos of sermons for the rest of my life? No, you can't. That's not really the ideal. That's not how it's supposed to be. How do we become continually and progressively conformed to the image of Christ? We need to be in a Christian community. We are shaped and formed by being part of a Christian community. We become like Christ by being deeply immersed and around other Christians, by sharing our lives. One brief example, Christians must love. That's a basic tenet of Christianity. We must love God and one another. Well, how do we become loving? How do we learn to love? Well, we learn to love by practicing love, by serving one another, by giving of yourself for someone else. And that requires other people. And YouTube is not enough, even when the sermons are really, really good, which they are, by the way. All right,